And away we go, episode 1361 of the Al Galdi podcast. It is Friday, July 3rd, 2026. This is the day before July 4th, 2026. This is the day before Independence Day. This is the day before the birthday of the United States of America. This is the day before the day that commemorates the ratification of the Declaration of Independence by the Second Continental Congress on July 4th, 1776, establishing the United States of America, which is turning 250 years old. The USA is entering its age 250 season. We hope that you have a great July 4th weekend. Hello and welcome to this Friday installment of the Al Galdi podcast, on which we talk Washington Commanders on every episode, no matter the time of year. This also is the podcast that follows Washington, D.C. area sports so that you don't have to. Happy Friday. And yes, there is a show for this day before July 4th, 2026. Next segment, our second of two conversations with Warren Sharp of SharpFootballAnalysis.com on the Washington Commanders, about whom he wrote extensively in his new book, The Sharp Football Analysis 2026 Football Preview. Warren joined us on Thursday's show, episode 1360, to discuss the Washington offense. And Warren, on this installment of the podcast, is joining us for a second conversation on Washington. And we, on this episode, are going to get advanced statistical breakdowns of why head coach Dan Quinn should be on the hot seat, the spectacular extent to which the defense was bad in the 2025 regular season, the outlook for the defense in the 2026 regular season, and the good news and bad news with Washington's 2026 regular season schedule. More high-level Washington Commanders analysis with Warren Sharp next segment, and he is not the only guest on this installment of the podcast. Later in the show, we'll talk Washington Wizards with the legendary former television play-by-play announcer of the Wizards, Steve Buckhantz. Buck, how do you like that?
How do you like that?
Yes, as Steve used to say when calling Wizards games on Comcast Sportsnet Mid-Atlantic / NBC Sports Washington. How do you like that? Steve Buckhantz will talk about the excitement with our Wizards right now, what the Wizards might have in AJ Debonsa, and who the best player for the Wizards was over Steve's 22 seasons as the television voice of the team. And Buck is going to give us some story time on his time with Michael Jordan over his 2 seasons as a player for the Wizards. Steve Buckhantz talking Wizards later in the show.
How do you like that?
Yes, Buck, how do you like that? Before we get to feedback, the Great 8 is not done yet. The Washington Capitals, they on Thursday afternoon announced having re-signed unrestricted free agent winger Alex Ovechkin to a 1-year contract. So he is not retiring yet. He will play for a 22nd NHL season, what will be his age 41 season. And this is not shocking. Indications as early as late this past regular season were that Ovi would be back for next season. B, the Caps this offseason have made a bunch of win-now moves. So if you're Ovi, how do you not come back? I mean, how do you not continue your NHL playing career for at least one more season? And I, as a Caps fan, am thrilled that Ovi is coming back for at least one more season. Major press conference on Monday featuring Ovechkin, the Caps lead owner, Monumental Sports and Entertainment founder, chairman, managing partner, and CEO Ted Leonsis, Caps president of hockey operations Brian McClellan, and Caps senior vice president and general manager Chris Patrick. It's funny, Patrick was supposed to do a press conference on Thursday afternoon at 12:30 addressing the Caps' aggressive all-in offseason so far, including the team over Wednesday afternoon and evening announcing the signings of 5 unrestricted free agents on day 1 of free agency in this NHL offseason. But the Caps on Thursday at noon announced that, quote, today's media availability with Washington Capitals senior vice president and general manager Chris Patrick has been rescheduled to Monday, July 6th. Additional details will be shared at a later time, end quote. And those additional details came out on Thursday afternoon at 12:29 when the Caps announced having re-signed Alex Ovechkin. As I posted on X on Thursday afternoon, I cannot recall another Caps offseason this exciting. Alex Ovechkin returning for a 22nd NHL season. Aggressive all-in moves via trade and free agency. Contract extension for the head coach Spencer Carberry. An exciting core of players in their 20s. Brian McClellan and Chris Patrick are doing quite well right now. By the way, the Caps' other two notable unrestricted free agents this offseason are gone. The Toronto Maple Leafs on Thursday morning announced having signed forward Brandon Duhaime to a 3-year contract, and the Pittsburgh Penguins on Wednesday afternoon announced having signed defenseman Trevor Van Riemsdyk to a 2-year contract. Also, MLB, it on Thursday evening announced punishments for the benches and bullpens clearing incident during the Washington Nationals' 8-1 win at the Boston Red Sox this past Tuesday night. 2 Nats players and 2 Red Sox players got suspended. Nats starting pitcher Cade Cavalli received a 7-game suspension. Nats starting pitcher Miles Mikas received a 5-game suspension. Red Sox first baseman Wilson Contreras received a 7-game suspension, and Red Sox outfielder Nate Eaton received a 3-game suspension. Suspensions begin Friday unless appealed, and Miles Mikas was scheduled to pitch in the Nats' upcoming series. The Nats on Thursday had an off day. Next up for them is a 9-game homestand to conclude the pre-All-Star break portion of their season. The homestand begins with a 3-game series against the Pittsburgh Pirates at Nationals Park, and probable starting pitchers for the Nats in the series had included Miles Mikas for Game 3 on Sunday afternoon at 1. What I take issue with regarding these punishments is Cavalli and Contreras getting the same suspension when Contreras, during the incident, threw a batting helmet. Cavalli did no such thing. Now, yes, Cavalli started the incident with his trash talking, although there is backstory. But what Contreras did in throwing his batting helmet, I mean, that was way out of line. You can hit me up on X at Al Galdi. You can email me the Al Galdi podcast at yahoo.com. You can reach me via writing a review of the podcast on Apple Podcasts. You can write about whatever you want, and I'll read what you write if you give the podcast a 5-star rating as we march toward 2,000 ratings of the podcast. But what we're looking for are 5-star ratings. They help out the podcast a lot, and we thank you very much. Email from John off me on episode 1353 of this podcast, telling the story of how I, over Memorial Day weekend, was in Pittsburgh for a family reunion for my wife's side of the family. A bunch of hardcore Steelers fans, but they know what I do for a living. And the question that I was asked more than any other question was, when are the Commanders going to change their name back to Redskins? That was the question that I got asked more than any other question. When are the Commanders going to change their name back to Redskins? Writes John, hi Al. On a recent episode, number 1353, you mentioned that the topic of conversation in Pittsburgh was when we are going back to the old name. I live in New Jersey, and when wearing Washington gear, I am always approached about this topic. While on my early morning Father's Day bike ride with my daughter, sporting my old Redskins hat, and no chastising me for not wearing a helmet, 3 separate people called out during my ride. Number 1, hail to the Redskins always. Number 2, they'll always be the Redskins. Number 3, yeah, brother, that's what I'm talking about. Hail to the Redskins. Even on a New Jersey bike trail in Giants and bandwagon Eagles territory, one thing unites us: hail to the Redskins. All the best, John. Thank you for the email, John. As I noted on Thursday's show, episode 1360, Thursday was July 2nd, 2026, the 6-year anniversary of the infamous statement from FedEx regarding the name of the NFL team of Washington, D.C. July 2nd, 2020, FedEx issued the following statement, quote, "We have communicated to the team in Washington our request that they change the team name," end quote. That statement, which was a function of many things, led to the Redskins on July 13th, 2020, announcing that they were retiring the Redskins name and Redskins logo. And here we are 6 years later, more than half of a decade later, and I, at a family reunion in Pittsburgh, got asked a bunch of times, when are the Commanders going to change their name back to Redskins? And John, on his New Jersey bike trail while wearing a Redskins hat, but not a helmet. John, you should wear a helmet, man. We want you to be safe. But John, on his New Jersey bike trail while wearing a Redskins hat, received not 1, not 2, but 3 shout-outs from people paying homage to the Redskins. I live in Maryland. I do see people wearing Redskins gear all of the time. Now, to be fair, I do also see people wearing Commanders gear. I, over the last 2 years, have seen an increase in people wearing Commanders gear. But I'd say that where I live, I see a 50-50 split in terms of Redskins gear and Commanders gear. Email from Robert Lee, a middle school history teacher and coach at Landon School in Bethesda, Maryland. On the Washington Nationals ownership group, the Lerner Group, writes Robert, Al, we have an exciting young team with a front office that clearly knows what they are doing, and we are wasting it. The fans are desperate for this team to be good, and we are excited again, but the ownership group seems to not care at all about the product on the field. I have to imagine that Paul Taboni came here with some assurances from the ownership group that it wanted to be good and wanted to win. Please tell us what you are hearing. Thank you for starting my day with you every day. Well, thank you very much for that, Robert. And I say that even though I went to Georgetown Prep in North Bethesda, Maryland, a fierce rival of Landon. Landon's in Bethesda. Georgetown Prep is in North Bethesda. This is the Battle of Bethesda. Anyway, as I discussed on episode 1352 of this podcast with Barry Zerluga, columnist for The Athletic, the big question looming over the Nats is how in is the Lerner ownership group on owning the team, especially in terms of spending on players. Something that I do find encouraging is that the Lerner Group this past offseason spent on infrastructure in a manner in which the group had not previously. My take is that the lack of spending on infrastructure had been worse than the lack of spending on players, but I get it. Spending on infrastructure costs a lot less than spending on players. Until this ownership group gets back to spending on players, there are questions about how in the group is on owning the team. And we may find out this coming offseason, because if the Nats doing so well right now is a sign that the rebuild is further along than anticipated, does President of Baseball Operations Paul Taboni this coming offseason push to spend big? And if so, does ownership allow him to spend big? You see, I'm not convinced that Taboni this past offseason wanted to spend real money on free agents. There's this presumption that the Nats this past offseason again didn't spend real money on free agents because ownership would not allow the team to spend real money on free agents. And that presumption may be true. I'm certainly not dismissing it. But analytically inclined heads of baseball operations like Paul Taboni tend to abide by the thinking of spending while rebuilding is silly and can even be counterproductive. The time to spend is when the team is about to bust out of the rebuild. It is entirely possible that Taboni this past offseason wasn't interested in spending big. But if this season is a sign of the Nats busting out of the rebuild, then heck yeah, this coming offseason is the time to spend. And, you know, I don't want the Nats spending recklessly or foolishly. I don't want the Nats spending for the sake of spending. What I want is the Nats spending in an aggressive but intelligent manner. Paul Taboni, I believe, is more than capable of doing that. Will he be allowed to do that this coming off season? 2026 Washington Commanders training camp is coming. Rookies report on July 24th, veterans on July 28th. Football season is coming. If you would like to grow your business or practice, consider advertising on this podcast. We're offering great deals in honor of the coming football season. Podcast advertising is very affordable and works. Put the power of the pod to work for you. Get your message out there to thousands of successful people in the Washington, D.C. area. Grow your business or practice. We'd love to have you on board. Email us to see what we can do for you. The email address is thealgaldipodcast@yahoo.com.
Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why drivers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit Progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
It is a pleasure to welcome back to the Al Galdi podcast Warren Sharp of SharpFootballAnalysis.com, the author of a superb book, The Sharp Football Analysis 2026 Football Preview, 619 pages of in-depth analysis and commentary on all 32 NFL teams. Warren joined us on Thursday's show, episode 1360, to discuss the Washington Commanders offense, including advanced statistical breakdowns of why Warren is a big believer in quarterback Jaden Daniels, what to expect under new offensive coordinator David Blau, and why Warren is concerned about Daniels' supporting cast on offense. And Warren now is joining us for a second conversation on Washington, and we on this installment of the podcast are focusing on head coach Dan Quinn, the defense, and the team's 2026 regular season schedule. Warren's book, The Sharp Football Analysis 2026 Football Preview, is tremendous. I on Thursday morning was up in the 4 a.m. Eastern hour, drinking my black coffee, getting ready to get humbled at the gym, and reading the chapter on Washington. So good. Cannot recommend the book enough. Team previews, season predictions, fantasy football, Vegas odds, over 2,500 heat maps and data visualizations, a coaching strategy and recommendations. Tons of good stuff. You can get the book at SharpFootballAnalysis.com. And Warren is offering a great deal for listeners of the Al Galdi podcast. For the PDF of the book, visit SharpFootballAnalysis.com and use the code COMMANDERS for 50% off. Yes, 50% off. A very generous offer from Warren to the listeners of this podcast. All right, Warren, Washington's defense, it has been bad in each of the last three regular seasons, but as you detail in the book, 2025 was a special kind of bad. The team this offseason has revamped the defense, including hiring a new defensive coordinator in Durante Jones and signing a number of free agents and spending the number 7 overall pick in the 2026 NFL Draft on linebacker Sonny Styles out of Ohio State. What is your assessment of how bad the defense was last regular season? To what extent should we expect improvement this coming regular season?
So this to me is the question of the podcast, right? I know that Jaden Daniels and his upside in offense drives wins more than defense does. But I felt like last year, even if Jaden Daniels was healthy, this team would struggle because of this defense. And I've got some historical statistics that I'll share momentarily, but I do want to take a step back and just look at Dan Quinn himself. Dan Quinn got this job off of what he was doing with the Dallas Cowboys. And what he was doing more with the Dallas Cowboys than anything else was a defense that was ball hawking and getting takeaways. The defense ranked number 1 in takeaways in his 3 years there, number 1 in turnover margin, number 1 in points off turnovers, number 1 in turnover EPA. Washington was a team, while Dan Quinn was crushing it with the Cowboys with takeaways, Washington wasn't recording any takeaways. They ranked 29th in takeaways, 30th in turnover margin, 30th in turnover EPA. So they were terrible. So they're like, wait, we got this coach. We can bring him in here, and maybe he can help us get those takeaways that are so elusive. But the problem is, and it's not quite a problem like a Todd Bowles problem, but the problem when you have a defensive-minded coach is that you need to have an elite defense because your offensive coordinator is going to be constantly cycling through. If you have a great offensive coordinator, he's going to get a head coaching job somewhere else. If you have a bad offensive coordinator and the team isn't winning, you as a defensive-minded coach are probably going to move on from him pretty quickly because otherwise your job is going to be on the line as a defensive-minded head coach. You have to have an elite defense to be able to sustain the inevitable turnover with your offensive coordinator. I mean, even look at the Seattle Seahawks with Clint Kubiak, right? They just win the Super Bowl. All of a sudden, boom, the offensive coordinator is gone. Why is that? Well, because he doesn't call plays. He got a head coaching job with the Las Vegas Raiders. So this is a defense that was far from being elite last year. They were the worst in the NFL. On a per-play basis, they were 32nd in most every single statistic that matters, or at least bottom 5 in most every single statistic that matters, including yards per play, yards per pass, early down success rate, EPA, explosive play rate allowed, etc. On a per drive basis, they were terrible. Dead last in yards per drive allowed, dead last in 3-and-out rate forced, and as I was alluding to before, 31st in turnovers per drive forced. This was a number 1 takeaway defense for Dan Quinn in Dallas, and they're second worst in the NFL. The issue that arose with the Washington Commanders last year was that they were allowing a lot of trips into the red zone. Because of their drive rate and their lack of being able to force 3 and outs, they were allowing drives to reach the red zone at the 5th highest rate in the league. 37% of drives reached the red zone. When teams were in the red zone, they allowed 68% of those drives to convert into touchdowns, which ranks second worst. That combination of red zone trips and red zone conversions is absolutely deadly. They were the only defense in the NFL to allow over 35% of drives to reach the red zone and over 67% of them to score touchdowns. Not just in 2025, but the only defense for the last 5 years that allowed that combination, which obviously results in a lot of points being scored, and not just 3 points, but 7 points. Since 2021, they are the only defense to be in that mark. In the first quarter, now here's one thing that I went back and looked at, Al, because the first thing I'm going to turn to is, was this defense worn down because the offense was so bad without Jaden Daniels, right? The offense is injured. The number 3 most injured running back room, number 3 most injured wide receiver room. Your quarterback's not there. Is the defense just giving up by the fourth quarter? And so that's not going to continue into 2026. Well, the defense allowed 101 points in the first quarter of games last year. The first quarter, when they're totally fresh, that was the 5th most of any team in the NFL. Therefore, they trailed after the first quarter by a combined 64 points last season, which was the second most in the NFL. They allowed their opponent's opening drive to average 49 yards. If that sounds bad, here's the statistic that backs it up. Not only is it the number 1 worst in the NFL last year, it was the number 1 worst for any Washington defense this century, and it was the 13th worst for any NFL defense this century. Another stat, they forced just 3 punts in their opponent's first 17 opening drives. So opening drive of the game, the Commanders forced only 3 punts. That is a 17.6% punt rate forced. That was the number 1 worst for any Washington defense this century, and the number 1 worst for any NFL defense overall this century. So dating back to 2000, 26 years of data, the worst in the NFL on opening drives at forcing punts. So when you're allowing that many yards per drive, the 5th worst of any defense this century, when you're allowing the number 1 worst forced punts of any defense this century, you're going to get in those holes. You're going to get in the holes where you're down and you're trailing, and then you're having to play from behind. And so I don't care if it's Jaden Daniels in at quarterback. It's not optimal, and he's not going to have success, and he's going to be put in these difficult situations. So, I think it's important to understand, in my opinion, the thin ice that your head coach is walking on right now, because Dan Quinn is in a tough situation, in my opinion. He just got rid of a scapegoat. I don't think that he should have been playing Jaden Daniels when he was to close the season last year, resulting in another injury. I think that they mismanaged that situation. His defense is not playing well. And they did what all head coaches and defensive-minded coaches will do. They loaded up on defense. If you look at their, I think it's their top 7 most expensive free agents that they signed, the only one that wasn't a defensive player was Chigaquanquo. Every other player on an average basis, the top 7 were defensive players, including Owe and Chason at edge, 2 edge rushers. And then, of course, the draft that you went and grabbed Sonny Styles and followed it up in the 5th round with Joshua Josephs, the D end out of Tennessee. 2 of your top 3 defensive picks, your only pick in the first 2 rounds. You're looking to rebuild that defense, and it's because Dan Quinn needs it. I'm not going to argue that they didn't need these players, but we still have a lot of holes on the offensive side of the ball. They're prioritizing the side of the ball that the head coach commands. And I think that in this situation, because of how bad that defense was and historically bad it was, it's warranted, but they're going to have to get a lot of these players to plug in quickly and execute quickly because, as you well know, the NFC East is a difficult division to play defense in. You've got a lot of good offenses on the schedule. And let me look here. I've got Washington. I'm projecting them to play the number 9 toughest schedule of opposing offenses this year. If you look top to bottom, it's just the offenses that they're playing. They're playing the NFC West. They're playing the AFC North, Cincinnati Bengals. They're playing the Minnesota Vikings, who have a new quarterback. The Atlanta Falcons have a new quarterback, most likely. The AFC South is improving. So I just think it's going to be tough for this defense, but they made some moves and they're going to hope that they pay off, and they're going to need to, because this was a historically bad defense that screwed up things for the entire team last year.
Wow, so many of the stats that you just cited are remarkable. Washington's 2026 regular season schedule. I'm a big fan of how you do your strength of schedule analysis. You do that based on projected win totals from Las Vegas odds makers. You, as of May 11th, had Washington as having the 8th hardest schedule in the NFL for the 2026 regular season, but also having the 5th easiest schedule in the NFL in the 2026 regular season for weeks 10 through 18. Also, you have been way ahead of the curve on the concept of net rest. A rest edge in the NFL is the number of extra days that a team has to rest and prepare for its game versus what the opponent has to rest and prepare for the game. Net rest is the cumulative sum of a team's individual game rest edges throughout an entire NFL regular season. You have Washington is ranking tied with the Seattle Seahawks for number 4 in the NFL in net rest in the 2026 regular season at +9. So the schedule, rough first half, manageable second half, and good news regarding net rest. What do you make of what Washington has in this schedule?
Yeah, they're going to, with a new offensive coordinator and a lot of new pieces on defense, you're going to have to gel very quickly with the opponents that you're going to play to start the year from an offensive perspective. When you start with the Eagles and you start with the Cowboys, those are two offenses, especially with the new offensive coordinator in Philadelphia, who can't be worse than who they had there last year. You're going to need to hit the ground running defensively. And so with all those new pieces that you're implementing, it's going to be tough. And then if you look at two of the top first 3 games that they're playing solid defenses, whether it's the Seattle Seahawks or the Philadelphia Eagles. So David Blau is going to have to hit the ground running with his offense as well. It is a tough schedule. And the interesting thing, I don't think that the fans are going to like to hear, but I put it in the book. I put it in the book every year, is how many games you're favored in. You're favored in only 5 games this year. Your expected wins is only 7.5. So those are appropriate numbers given the schedule that you are going to face. The back half of the schedule is soft with teams like the Arizona Cardinals and the Tennessee Titans and the Atlanta Falcons, but 2 of those 3 games are on the road. You know, you have to go out to Arizona to play. You have to go down to Tennessee to play. And so it's not as easy as playing those teams at home. And in fact, you close the season on a 3-game stretch of away in Minnesota, away in Jacksonville, home versus Dallas. So this is not going to be an easy schedule. And from a rest perspective, it is a good thing that is not a worse situation, because most teams do struggle with rest, especially later on in the season. The Commanders, the entire season, play just 1 game with a rest deficit. And it is that game in Arizona, week 12, after playing Monday Night Football at home against the Cincinnati Bengals. So it's a short week because you play off of a Monday Night Football game, but at least that Monday night game was at home. And at least you're playing the Arizona Cardinals, which is only a 1-day rest disadvantage. So I think from a rest perspective, I'd be very happy if you're the Washington Commanders. It certainly beats the alternative. You could argue, hey, we could get better rest than this. I just don't want bad rest. Like, you don't have to have great rest. You just don't want bad rest. And so the Commanders, fortunately, don't have to deal with that this year. But they do have to deal with playing some more difficult divisions and more difficult foes. And like you said, starting off the season with the schedule that they do just means they have to be a lot sharper in their preparation heading to week 1. They got to have a very good plan. They've got to figure out how much we want to play Jaden Daniels in the preseason so he can pick up the offense without overdoing it, because they're going to have to hit the ground running to start the year.
Warren Sharp of sharpfootballanalysis.com for the PDF of his book, The Sharp Football Analysis 2026 Football Preview. Visit sharpfootballanalysis.com and use the code COMMANDERS for 50% off. Take advantage of that special offer for listeners of this podcast. Warren, thank you. Happy July 4th. All the best.
All right, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right. By the way, before we conclude the Washington Commanders portion of the program, San Francisco 49ers receiver Brandon Ayuk, more from him on social media in his quest to join our team. Now, he in recent days had been quiet on social media, but Ayuk on Thursday on Instagram put up multiple posts, including a video of him dancing in burgundy shorts and burgundy shoes with the message, quote, "Mood, 'cause I'm gon' be a commander soon," end quote. Now, you'll notice that I'm laughing, and I'll say this about Brandon Ayuk. He's funny. He has a sense of humor. Now, personally, if I'm Washington, I don't like this guy repeatedly mentioning me and just assuming that I'm going to sign him if/when the Niners release him. I do think that Ayuk would be best served by being quiet on social media for now, to say nothing of all of the questions that we have about how he's doing physically and mentally and what truly happened between him and the Niners. But the guy is funny, at least to me. Okay? I do get a kick out of these videos. Mood, 'cause I'm gonna be a commander soon. And he's dancing. Mood, 'cause I'm gonna be a commander soon. Maybe you are, Brandon, but maybe you are not. That's what we're trying to figure out.
Imagine buying your kid a toy only to find the batteries aren't included, or buying furniture but missing the tools to build it. Frustrating, right? Now imagine the exact same feeling, but you're paying way more. That is what buying business software usually feels like. Fragmented, disconnected, and incredibly expensive. Odoo completely changes that. Odoo is a complete, fully integrated business suite where all your apps actually talk to each other. We're talking automated lead routing for your sales team, seamless AI integration, and intuitive point-and-click website builder. It's everything your business needs to scale, saving you time, headaches, and money. Stop piecing your software together. Go to odoo.com. That's ODOO.com to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
The Washington Bullets / Washington Wizards, they have not won at least 50 games in a regular season since the 1978-1979 regular season and have not advanced past the second round of the NBA playoffs since 1979. The franchise has been one of the worst franchises in sports for nearly 50 years. What's funny, though, is that the Bullets were one of the best teams in the NBA in the 1970s. Now, this was way before my time, but the Bullets in the 1970s made the playoffs in each of the 10 seasons of the decade, made 4 NBA Finals. Yes, 4. 1971, 1975, 1978, and 1979, and won one NBA title, the title for the 1977-1978 season. Yeah, our team did all of that. As we have been discussing on the podcast, there with the Wizards is excitement like there has not been in years. The Wizards, off their 3-season tank, have 2 established stars in Trae Young and Anthony Davis. Yes, we'll see if Davis sticks around, but it now is looking like the Wizards are not trading him this offseason. The Wizards have a nucleus of a number of promising young players, including Bilal Coulibaly, Alex Sarr, Keyshawn George, Bub Carrington, Trey Johnson, Will Riley, and now A.J. Debonsa, who on Thursday officially signed his contract with the Wizards. And there are other Wizards players who are intriguing, like Justin Champagnie and Jameer Watkins and Felix Okpara. Heck, just the fact that the Wizards have come up as a dark horse candidate for LeBron James as an unrestricted free agent is a sign that our team is making progress. NBA insider Brandon Scoop B. Robinson of ScoopB.com, he this past Tuesday afternoon in a post on X reiterated something that he wrote in May, quote, "The Washington Wizards are quietly positioning themselves as a compelling wild card in the sweepstakes for LeBron James," end quote. Now, as a Wizards fan, I do not want LeBron. I want our team sticking to its process and continuing to develop key young players. I don't want LeBron in what would be his age 42 season hijacking our team, but just the Wizards coming up as a contender for LeBron is something. It is a pleasure to welcome back to the Al Galdi podcast right now the legendary former television play-by-play announcer of the Washington Wizards, Steve Buckhantz. Buck was the television voice of the Wizards for the 1997-1998 season through the 2018-2019 season. He also was a major force as the sports director and lead sports anchor for Fox 5 in Washington, D.C. for years. As many of you know, it was Buck who in March 1993 broke the massive news of Joe Gibbs' first retirement as Washington Redskins head coach. Hey, Buck, how are you?
Al, I think that was when dinosaurs roamed the earth. I mean, that was a while ago, it seems like. But, great memories. And when you mentioned, the Channel 5 days, those were the glory years of the Redskins. Those were, and it's funny, we go to a golf tournament every year in Queenstown. It's a charity tournament called the Mickey Seal. And Mark Rippon sort of runs it with a guy named Tom O'Farrell. And it's a reunion of all the old Redskins. And for me, it's a treat because it's all the guys that I covered when I was at Channel 5 and I'm friendly with, to this day, Rippon and Jacoby and Bostic and Donnie Warren and Curtis Jordan and Reggie Branch and just on and on and on and Gary Clark and it's a reunion of all these guys. And so for me, that's a real pleasure because truthfully, Al, it was, you were back then in those days, it was a blessing to cover that team because some of the young people now that don't know what a winner looks like, back in those days, you expected the Redskins to go to the playoffs and probably the Super Bowl, and they did, 3 or 4 times. So it was a real blessing to do that. And then the Wizards was obviously, the greatest job I think that you could have in a market, especially for somebody that grew up here.
And so what about what's going on with the Wizards right now? We get it. The team has made the playoffs just once over the last 8 seasons, hasn't had a winning regular season since 2017, 2018. We are a ways away from planting the flag of victory, but there is an excitement with the Wizards, so the likes of which we have not had in a while. A lot of belief, including from me, in what Monumental Basketball president Michael Winger and Wizards general manager Will Dawkins have done since taking over the team's basketball operations in the 2023 offseason. A lot of momentum via the Wizards getting the 2026 NBA Draft's #1 overall pick, with which they took A.J. Debonsa. Where are you on what's going on with the Wizards right now?
Well, the most excitement since they had their last #1 pick, and that was John Wall. And he turned out to be a pretty good player with the team, and with he and Bradley Beal and the guys they had. There was one year where they were 1 win away from going to the Eastern Conference Championship. If they had beaten Boston in a game, I guess it was a game 6 or 7, they would have gone to the Eastern Conference Championship. So they had some good years with them. And obviously before that with Gilbert Arenas, they went to the playoffs 4 years in a row. So it wasn't like this team has been horrible. Although you'll hear people say they are, I think the perception is that they've been horrible because they haven't had a competitive team in a while. But I think the excitement now is legitimate. I mean, look, anytime you get a #1 pick and it's not Kwame Brown, I think that you're hopefully on the right track. It seems to me that these guys that are running the team are on the right track. Again, the perception from people is that they suck. It's the same perception with the Nationals, and they don't suck. It's unless you give a city a consistent winner like the Capitals. Okay, that's the perfect example. Before Alex Ovechkin, you couldn't put 10,000 people in that arena. They didn't know who the Capitals were. And then they got the greatest player ever, and they were consistently winning, and now you can't get in the building. And the same thing was true with the football team for years and years and years until Snyder took over and kind of tarnished the image. So I think that now you have to be legitimately excited about this first pick. He looks like could be a great player. I hope he's an impact player because they need that right away. The biggest question is, is Anthony Davis going to play? Trae Young obviously signed a big contract. That's fine. These young players, and they're good, Keyshawn George and Bub Carrington and all, these Alex Sarr, these guys are good, and they have the makings of what could be a very competitive team. Now, at some point now, they're going to have to pay these young guys, and that's the other thing. How long will they be able to stay, and how long will they be able to keep this group? But yes, you get the number one pick. He's good. Hopefully he can turn into being a really, really good player. I mean, when Gilgeous Alexander came into the league, he was a good player, but nobody thought he was the MVP. It takes a while. You don't just come in to be the MVP unless you're Wes Unseld. So I think everybody should be excited that they can be. Look, there were a lot of games last year where they were competitive. They just didn't win. And people say, well, they tanked. Well, I guess there's different ways of tanking. Maybe if you pull players out of a game and you don't win, that's tanking. But I've never seen a professional athlete purposely stop playing or, quote, tank a game because they just don't do that. I've never seen a pro player do that. Now, you could have injuries and get taken out of a game, and then you lose a game, and that's, considered tanking. They did what they had to do to get the number one pick. So, yeah, Al, I'm excited, and I hope that they do well, and it'll be fun to watch them. I think they could be good.
Did you have a preference with what the Wizards did with the number one overall pick?
No, because there was talk about them trading to get, Ace Bailey and maybe some other players or whatever, and that's fine too. But I always, I've got the Charlie Casserly philosophy: take the best player available. When those guys used to do that with the Redskins, always take the best player available. And why pass up on a guy who's so highly touted and it's a great draft and you've got a chance to get the number one pick? That's what I would do. So, yeah, you can't ever have too many good players. And if you look around the NBA at the teams that are, in the conversation, they all have at least one superstar, maybe two or three. And you got to have somebody that does that. Now, whether this guy will become a superstar, who knows? But it'll be interesting. I just... the team's not going to win a championship in the near future. We know that, but we want them to be competitive. We like them to make the playoffs and maybe win a game or two and then go from there. And I hope they're on the right track.
I, on last Friday's show, episode 1356, talked about who will be the king of Washington, D.C. sports when Washington Capitals winger Alex Ovechkin retires. Ovi is the king until he retires, but we have three enticing candidates for successor to Ovi in Washington Commanders quarterback Jaden Daniels, Washington Nationals outfielder James Wood, and now A.J. Debonsa. Long way to go for all three of those guys, of course. But what do you think when you think about what Debonsa can be for D.C. sports? Ovechkin, of course, has set an enormous standard.
That was the first thing off the top of my head. I mean, whether you're a hockey fan or not, you have to realize that this guy is the greatest goal scorer of all time and just an amazing player, even at, 40? I mean, he and Jaden Daniels hasn't reached that pinnacle yet. He's a really good player, and he's got the ability to be a superstar because he was his first year, and then everybody caught on to him. But no, he's not in the same league with Alex Ovechkin, and Ovechkin is, and I'm a mild hockey fan. I mean, I watch every game, and I love to listen to Joe B and Locker and Walton whenever they're doing the games, and he's made the team incredible. But yeah, he's the I think it's a little far-fetched at this point to call this guy to say, well, can he be? I don't know how good he is. I mean, he was a great college player. We know that. It takes time in the NBA. I don't think you just come in and be great, but we'll see. Maybe he could be. I don't know. On this team, he'll certainly have the opportunity to show what he can do.
We're talking Washington Wizards with the legendary former television play-by-play announcer of the Wizards, Steve Buckhantz. The goal for the Wizards is to win an NBA title. The hope is that A.J. Debonsa will be an elite player. Winning a title in the current NBA requires having an elite player. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, look around. Whether you're even, like Milwaukee, you got to have one guy that is a standout great player, it seems to me, on just about any team. Whether it's Doncic or LeBron or Alexander, or you just, look around at some of these teams. Even the Knicks, who are so deep, it's crazy. But they got the one guy, Brunson, who's just spectacular. And I mean, I remember calling games for his father. And he is, the son is just phenomenal. That was an amazing run and an amazing team by that squad. But look, the Wizards will. I hope they'll be. I think they'll be watchable. I think they'll be competitive. Now, look, I'll be honest with you. A lot of my friends from Atlanta called me as soon as we got Trae Young, and they said you can't win a championship with Trae Young, and it's clear that Atlanta couldn't. The Wizards aren't looking to win a championship in the next 2 or 3 years, but they needed a guy like him that A, was legitimate, B, good guard, can make 3-point shots. I mean, in Steph Curry fashion, is a brilliant passer, so he's exciting, and he's a great player. Can you win a championship with him? I don't know. Atlanta couldn't, but it doesn't matter because the Wizards aren't looking to win a championship in the next few years. They want to be in the conversation. They want to be competitive, and this guy will make them that. And then the key is whether Davis can play or will play. We don't know what his situation is. But they have the makings of, I think, a competitive team. And I like Trae Young. I think he brings people into the arena. He's fun to watch. He's a legitimate player. So did they pay him a lot of money? Yeah, I don't know about that contract, but whatever. I ain't worried about that. It's not my money. Let them, we don't worry about the money once these guys get on the court. We want to see them play. We want to see them win. So I think he could make this team a really good team, or, at least a competitive team.
Much more with Steve Buckhantz in moments, but please consider subscribing to the podcast. If you're not already doing that, subscribing to the podcast costs nothing. Make sure that you never miss an episode and helps out the podcast a lot. And if you're already subscribing, thank you.
If your business runs on 5 different apps, 12 browser tabs, and 1 spreadsheet that everyone's afraid to touch, it's probably time for Odoo. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that connects every part of your business into one powerful, easy-to-use platform. So instead of wasting time switching between disconnected systems, your entire business works together in real time. Your team moves faster, your data stays accurate, and you can actually focus on growing your business. Let one unified system run your entire business. From the first opportunity to the final payment, everything works together in one place. Whether you're a small business or managing a large operation, Odoo gives you one flexible platform built to grow with you. Learn more at odoo.com. That's ODOO.com.
You're listening to this podcast, so I know you've got a curious mind. Here's a helpful fact you may not know yet. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save over $900 on average. Pop over to Progressive.com, answer some questions, and you'll get a quick quote with discounts that are easy to come by. In fact, 99% of their auto customers earn at least one discount. Visit Progressive.com and see if you can enjoy a little cash back. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $946 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2024 and May 2025. Potential savings will vary. Cavalli.
Good to have you with us. We're talking Washington Wizards with the legendary former television play-by-play announcer of the Wizards, Steve Buckhantz. Who is the best player for the Wizards over your time calling games for the team? I assume that the top three candidates are Michael Jordan, Gilbert Arenas, and John Wall.
Well, again, if you were considering every player, it would be Jordan. I mean, even at age 39 and 40, he was better than 80% of the other guards in the league. And he could still do things that other guys couldn't do. And he still won games that other guys couldn't win. And he was just... I could sit here for an hour and tell you about trips we took with him and iconic situations, because he's an icon. And Phil Chenier and I were very lucky to be able to get to know him and travel with him, because you rarely get to get close to an icon, whether it's a president or an athlete or whomever. And he clearly is. So that was really cool to be with him and get to know him and share situations with him and watch him play, and then watch the reaction of people around the league as we would travel to other cities. People would just freak out when they saw him. It was like traveling with the Beatles. I mean, it was just unbelievable. Barring that, I would say absolutely Gilbert Arenas. I mean, he was unstoppable. Before his knee injury, he was completely unstoppable and explosive, and a great player to watch and fun to be with and all of that. John Wall was the fastest player I ever saw from end to end, unless you go way, way back into the NBA. But he was the quickest and the fastest player I ever saw that could get from one end to the other and generally finish. I had always hoped he would have developed a jumper in the lane a little bit better, a la Steph Curry and even Trey Young. They have the ability to do that. He never got to be truthfully great at that, but he was a hell of a player, made some big shots. There were times at the end of games when he wanted to take the last shot and thought he needed to take the last shot, and truthfully, I would have rather had Bradley Beal take the last shot. But he was a superstar, and he was big, and he was a good player and a good guy, and I think he was a great player. So calling games, it would be those three, and the order would be MJ, Gilbert, and Wall.
So this year marks 25 years since Michael Jordan came out of retirement to play for the Wizards. In January 2000, became part owner and president of basketball operations for the Wizards, then played for the Wizards for 2 seasons, the 2001-2002 and 2002-2003 seasons, his age 38 and age 39 seasons. You mentioned that you have some Jordan stories. I wonder if you would mind sharing with us a story or two.
Yeah. Again, there were so many. This one was pretty funny. We were at the in Memphis. We stayed at the Peabody Hotel, which is a legendary hotel. Excuse me, Al. And they have this tradition there where they have. Some people have heard of this, some people haven't. But they have these ducks that live on the top of the roof there, and they're like, coddled. I mean, they're like legendary animals, and they bring them down every day on the elevator, and they have a process where they take them to this fountain that's in the middle of the lobby of the Peabody Hotel, and it's a procession, and it's a big deal, and people line up to see all that stuff. And these ducks have been to the White House. They've been all over the place. I mean, it's a big deal. So anyway, we're at Memphis, and we're staying at the Peabody, and one of the managers came up to one of Michael's people, and he said, "You know what would be awesome?" He says, if Michael brought the ducks down and led them to the fountain where they reside. And the guy, Michael's guy, looked at the dude and he said, "Let me ask you a question." He said, "Do you like your ducks?" And the guy said, "Well, of course." He said, "Because if Michael Jordan gets off of that elevator, you're going to have a lot of dead ducks." He says, "People are going to storm that guy, and those ducks are going to be gone." And he said, so Michael didn't do it. It just so happened that Jimmy Carter was at the hotel, and he ended up coming down the elevator and bringing the ducks to the fountain. But it was a funny story, and what's interesting is that particular hotel, and again, everywhere we went, whether it was 2:00 in the morning or midday, there were hordes of people lined up. You know, you got these geeks that come out there with their photos, and they want you to sign stuff, and they line up outside the hotel. Well, at the Peabody in Memphis, I've never seen so many people lined up from inside the lobby all the way outside the hotel, down the street to where the buses were, just to get a glimpse of Michael Jordan. And again, all over the country that happened. But in Memphis, for some reason, it was more than any other city I've been in. But that's just one of many Michael Jordan stories. You know, we've been on planes with him. He used to see, at one point, he got so frustrated. We had lost a game in Cleveland. And if you can remember back in the day, afterwards somebody popped a mic in front of him, or a writer asked him, and he said, "We stink." He was really mad because we had lost a game in overtime. So we get on the back of the airplane. Back then we were flying in a 727, which had the stairs that come down the back. And you would come up the back end of the plane, and then the players would go up into the front. And he came up in the back end, and he looked up in the front of the plane, and I'm not going to use the expletives he used, but he basically said, these guys, he was so frustrated, he said, I'm not sitting up there anymore. I'm going to ride back here with the grown-ups. And that's where the media, there weren't many media back then. It was just me and Phil and Glenn Consor and Dave Johnson and whoever else happened to be with us, Ed Tapscott and a couple of other people. And for the rest of the season, Jordan rode in the back with us. And Phil and I had a golf game set up at Las Colinas in Dallas, and it was a day off. And we told him that, and he was not incensed, but he knew that he didn't like the fact that we were going to play and he couldn't. So he went to Doug Collins, who was the coach, and he had Doug move practice the next day back 2 hours so that he could play golf with us at Las Colinas. And that's the kind of stuff that he did. But, listen, when you're an icon and you're the greatest player of all time, you can do things like that. So just those kinds of stories, he was fun to travel with. We used to bust balls with him all the time because we knew he wasn't going to be there that long, and he would break balls with us, and it was fun. We had a good time with him.
That's so funny. The legendary former television play-by-play announcer of the Washington Wizards, Steve Buckhantz. Buck, thank you. Happy July 4th. All the best.
Thank you, Al. Great to be with you. As always, you do a fantastic job.
And that'll do it for you and me for now, but there's more to come. Monday's show, episode 1362. We'll have a lot for you on the Washington Commanders. Also on Monday's show, I'll talk Washington Nationals and Baltimore Orioles. The Nats this weekend have a 3-game series against the Pittsburgh Pirates at Nationals Park. The O's this weekend have a 3-game series at the Cincinnati Reds. Have a great weekend. Happy July 4th, and I'll talk to you on Monday.
How do you like that?